Hello, I'm Chigozie Arts, my dear colleagues at Just Dig It. This is my final presentation on the research I've been doing during my internship for the Regreen app 2.0. So yeah, let's get started. To start at the beginning, for my internship, I had 5 competencies that I was meant to work on with my work and different things. So my final product, this research, as well as the wireframes I made for them, fall mostly under these 2 competencies that I've been working on, to imagine and create, and to concept, understanding, and framing. So yeah, first we started in this process to I started working with Romee, who was the service designer. We asked to make the lo-fi wireframes and to do research into research into like the journey and the persona and the needs of the user of the new concept, the new app. And these wireframes first were asked of me to turn these into hi-fi wireframes meant to gain funding, but it turned out that I wasn't the right person to do this, and that George was going to make these wireframes. So instead, I ended up talking with Margot, and we came to the following research questions that I could still work on as a research instead of a pitch. And these wireframes, therefore, aren't also the most beautiful wireframes I've ever made, but they are meant to represent different aspects of the concept of the app, and to kind of think and talk about it in more detail, which is what this research is about. So the main question of my research was what steps need to be taken to develop validated wireframes into a small-scale prototype for testing. Let me break that apart for you. So right now we are somewhere in phase 3. You can see here on the side. So we have an initial offering, and those wireframes are being worked on by Jort, but they're not done yet and they're not validated yet. So my wireframes are kind of like a version of his that are more lo-fi, but still more worked out than the wireframes of Romee from phase 2. And so the next phase would be to make a small-scale prototype after getting funding. And the question that was laid with me by Margot was, how would this testing phase look like, and how can we develop a prototype? How do we get there? And kind of part 2, so which concept elements of the concept of the application should be tested before making a large-scale prototype, so before moving on to phase 5. So these are the questions I worked on. The first concept elements of a small-scale prototype, I think that should be tested, would be the module land mapping. This is basically part of the onboarding and the first module. So this is what the user has to do when they start using the product. And it's worth testing this aspect because there are technical and interactive questions that need to be answered before a final prototype can be built. So that's also kind of how I went into this research for the different aspects of the different concept aspects of the app. I kind of have been looking for the right questions to ask in that moment. And then later I will also show like a menu of different methods to build a prototype, to do research for a prototype, and to test the prototype itself. So the second concept aspect that I think should be tested is the module of Kasiki High. So this is the first learning module. I think it's very important to work this out further because it's not clear yet. I've kind of tried to make like some examples of how it could work, but I'm not saying that that's how those modules of lessons are going to work. But yeah, I think it's definitely very important to develop consistent patterns in these modules. So how do you want the user to learn and interact in a playful way with the content and the information that we're trying to give them? So kind of the questions that are part of this is, yeah, how can you gamify it? How can you keep it playful? Which information and content do you want users to receive before taking action? How is this made clear? Which actions are tied to that information? How do you make it clear to do those actions? Then I was also thinking, do you want to use media like little videos in the learning modules? How would the user use that? Would there be a time limit on those pieces of media? And also information in a learning module that you've already had, how could you maybe look back for it? How could you retrieve it? So yeah, these are kind of questions to consider when testing these modules, or at least this concept elements, learning modules. Then the third concept element I think that should be tested is additions to your land. So if you plot your land when you start the app, through the process, which is a long scale process of a year, multiple years, to add these techniques to your digital land in your app, and especially tying that to actual actions and actual saving the actions you do and the land interventions that you do. How can you save those into the app? So the third concept element is perhaps the most essential because it is like the heart of the proposition. How is this app going to help users, in this case farmers, in a playful way learn these land interventions over the course of multiple years? And this is kind of the heart of that. So the questions tied to that part is what info or data can users achieve this, can help users achieve this. So how can we in the app help them get there? How and in which moments does the app motivate the users to action? How do notifications play a role? What data points does the user need to track in the app? When is illegal? When is it logical to save proof of actions in the app? What can users receive or find from tracking their actions? These kinds of things. Then the profile and discovery and XP points content. This is an aspect of the app that is maybe not one clear aspect, but it's kind of like how does having your own profile in this platform give you anything, and what it gives you, how can you use that? So it's a bit more abstract, but it's definitely very important to get this right, because users might be drawn to the app because this works, or be uninterested from the app or the platform because it doesn't work. So it could be wise to discuss with a group of users, especially on this part, on what they would find appropriate. So different questions for this concept elements to reflect on is, how can the app become a game for users, and how can users track their progress? Is asking a profile picture desirable, for instance? And can others see your profile? Then there's also some more technical things to consider, because the infrastructure for things you would want in this app is a lot of work and investment to get there. And if you aren't sure it's what the users are looking for or want, it would be a waste. So part of this is also building on what the current app does. So that's basically just a library of media and content on land interventions. And how do you want to build on that in this app? Can users add to that library? And what flow what flow is appropriate for users to share content or see other people's content? So what can they share together? Does the user receive anything for their achievements? Can the users use their points for anything? Can the users grow their impact together? So how can they interact on land interventions? And yeah, what's valuable for these users to exchange and communicate together? And then now comes the different methods that I've researched that could be used to develop a prototype, and not only develop a prototype, but then test a prototype. So it goes from develop to testing. To start with an expert interview, this is something we partly already did with Arthur about some technical feasibilities, like how would it work with GPS, Wi-Fi, and data? Is that feasible? Would you always need that? It's also a very important thing to think about in different concept elements. But especially also in the way of testing and prototyping, I think it could be wise to ask experts in this field on how they would handle this. So this method mostly serves to use the knowledge that's already there. And partly we've already done that. Romeo did that. And also before that, there was already some research into competitors and different apps that are already there. So this would definitely be more on the things that we haven't researched yet, like getting even more advice on good testing methods and how this could work, especially with the users in Tanzania. I think that's very important. Then these next two methods, well, next three actually, but you can just see the two now, are co-creation and Scamper. So co-creation is a method meant to include the user group themselves to find a good design, to gain inspiration. So by organizing sessions where the users are invited to help design the product themselves, like the module land mapping or content of the profiles. And users also really appreciate this, and it's good to ask them in these sessions to think aloud and to record their way of thinking and their logic. So, and also especially with this method, it's about finding new inspiration, so new opportunities to help the user to build things into the product that helps the user out and makes the experience better. So Scamper is also used for this. Scamper is a morphological technique where you're actively trying to think of variations of different functionalities and ideas. So perhaps the onboarding land module, mapping your land. Perhaps that's not what the users need. Perhaps you can substitute or combine or adapt or modify or put to a different use or eliminate or reverse this concept, perhaps. Or you could think of different versions of the module land mapping as an onboarding technique, and you can think of different ways in which that could work by combination, substitution, adaptation, modification, and this is what Scamper is all about. By using these letters, you can make different versions of kind of the same concept, but in different ways, and you can really find the extent and the potentials for functionalities and interactions with the product. And then the morphological map, that's the third method of this, and it's a way of systematically comparing kind of the different versions that you might have thought of in the last method, and you can compare them per heuristic. So the different things, different concepts in your product, and by combining some or maybe discarding some, you end up with a list of requirements and concept elements that fit that requirement the best. So yeah, this is what these three methods are about: gaining a wider view of what's possible, finding new possibilities to offer as good as an experience as possible for your user. By including them also early in the process, you prevent missing obvious opportunities that would be more work and more valuable to integrate later in the process. It's always better to include the user group into your research as soon as possible, especially for a user group that we're focusing on, because I think it's definitely setting yourself up to fail by doing that all the way in the end, because we already know that we're all the way here in Holland, that we're designers of such a different background. And so it's very important not to design over the heads of people, but to really use their wisdom and their knowledge to create a good product. Then the next methods, participant observation. These methods are meant to learn about the context in which the user will be using the product. So what are we actually designing for, and how can we help? So by capturing observations of the user group, their patterns, gaining empathy for their situations, noticing details they take for granted and turn them into opportunities. It's kind of a fly on the wall technique, if you can recognize that. So this would be really trying to spend time and build a feeling for the different contexts in which the product would be used in real life. And to get this up front whilst designing the first prototype, the small scale prototype. Then card sorting is also another method of including the user group, and especially to learn how they think about content and about information. So with this method, you would use cards and you would write or draw aspects of the app, of the functionalities on these cards. And you would ask the users, the participants, to categorize and organize these cards. And whilst they're doing that, it's important that you ask them to speak aloud and to really find out how they came to the different conclusions that they came to, and to capture this also. By doing this, you really learn how users, how they interpret information, and how they, how information is linked in their context, especially for things like a menu or the architecture of data and information. This is a good technique. Then these are kind of the last two methods for a small scale prototype. There's scenario and usability testing. So a scenario is basically, you could say, like a storyboard, but you can make it in different ways. But it's making a scenario after doing all the research and finding like the different features and functionalities and how they should work. What's the best decision after doing all that? It's good to make a scenario, think of a scenario, and design that, make it touchable, make it readable, make it testable, huh? So you kind of already have a hypothesis and an idea of how ideally the features and the interactions with the product would work. It's good to do this for the different aspects, concept aspects of the application. And with this in hand, you can go to usability testing and testing these different concepts, these different aspects of the concept with small scale prototypes. And you're still doing this in kind of like a lab setting. So you're doing this in a controlled setting. And with usability testing, you find out how wrong you were. And what's the purpose of a scenario is to find out how you thought it would work and what problems users are still bumping into when they use the product. Because you can assume that even after doing all the research in the world, the first time users interact with a new product or a new service, they're going to run into issues. And by doing usability testing, you find them out earlier and you can prevent them or try to think around them. And by asking participants to use the prepared prototype of aspects of the app. Then if you did that and you found out most of the issues users run in all these different parts of the app, and you finally decide this is what we're going to do, this is what it's going to be, then the large-scale prototype, kind of like the beta version, you can use this in the actual field. So this would be good as a last method to test a final prototype or a beta version or large-scale prototype, to test it really in Tanzania with like potential farmers that would be the test case for this app, and to really prepare well how this prototype is going to be used and measured, how the experiences of the users are going to be measured, and especially what you want to measure and what you want to get out of it. So all this needs to be thought of ahead very well in a field trial or field test, because you don't really have any power anymore to change things once the test starts, because it's not in a lab setting anymore. So this was my presentation on how the Regreen 2.0 app could be developed further into a small-scale prototype and how these could be tested. Thank you for a lovely internship. I've had a lot of fun working on this and working on the other projects and everything I gained experience with during my stay here at Just Dig It. I really enjoyed working with all of you I got to work with, and maybe till next time, have a good day.